So I do believe we're going to start now. I want to hand you over to the Executive Director at Schools for Children, a host for Different Choices 2021. Paul.
Thank you and welcome, everyone. I'm Paul Stein, Executive Director, as Denise said, of Schools for Children. We're the presenters of Different Choices 2021. We are a Massachusetts nonprofit that runs a variety of schools and educational programs, including 3 schools for students who have experienced anxiety, depression, trauma, and other mental health issues, often combined with learning disabilities. We're so glad you have chosen to attend this pilot series for Different Choices. This initiative seeks to offer increased support for students and their families as they make transition to college or career training and other post-high school experiences, and also to provide a platform for the many amazing organizations that are committed to increasing opportunities and advancing greater equity in education. Now, it may appear to families that many services just disappear when students graduate and leave the world of IEPs and staff support in high school. At the same time, programs may feel that they are operating in a vacuum. Different Choices will shine a light on what is available to students and their families. For us, this is just the beginning. We hope to continue to expand this effort and become a larger annual event. So tell us what you want to see next time. What topics would be most valuable to you? You can tell us in a survey we'll send shortly after this program. And please visit our website, differentchoices.org, to find resources mentioned in this session, as well as lots of other support. Thank you all for joining us. Now, before we get started, I want to take a moment to introduce you again to Denise Moorhead, who is tonight's program manager. Denise, you can wave or whatever. You can message her or Raymond, our tech support, if you have questions. Now, tonight's presentation is Designing Your Own Path to the Future. Let's hear what this extraordinary panel has to say, and let me introduce our moderator, Alex Morris-Wood, Dean of Admissions at Beacon College. Alex will introduce tonight's other panelists. So let's get started.
Great, thank you so much for having Beacon College here and this fantastic group of panelists. My name is Alex Morris-Wood. I'm the Dean of Admissions, Transition Programs, and Strategic Outreach at Beacon College. I'll talk a little more about our program. And if you can let me share the screen, and we're gonna kind of introduce our fantastic group of panelists, all here to talk about how we can design our path to a great post-secondary launch. We have a fantastic group of experts here across all different domains to feed any questions that you have and to respond to classic inquiries I think we all get by working in the field. If you have questions throughout this program, please use the Q&A box or the chat box. I can monitor that as well. And we want to make this engaging for you. So if you have questions throughout the program, please don't hesitate to ask. We want to make this conversational and informative. So with that, let's kind of get started. First up, I would like to introduce Angelique, who could give a little bit of background about her role as a special education coordinator and her area of expertise. Angelique.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Alex. Again, my name is Angelique McGrew. I am a special education coordinator for Youth Build Charter Schools of California. And I put a little synopsis there of who we are, but basically we're a project-based high school, and we serve young people from the ages of 18. It's sometimes we get, from 16, sometimes we get students that are like 27, and sometimes we make those exceptions for those students as well. But this is basically like we're basically like a second or third, kind of like fourth chance school, and giving those high school students or giving those students or young adults access to get a diploma. that were previously enrolled in like public schools or things like that, and that were just like pushed out. We offer vocational training, counseling, leadership development, post-secondary readiness. And yeah, that's just us in a nutshell.
Thank you so much. We have Zivin here, Zivin Drake, if you want to give some background about you and your position.
Certainly. Thank you for having me, everyone. Thank you, Alex. My name is Zivin Drake. I am here to tell you that whatever you want to do out there in that big, beautiful world, you can go and grab that big, beautiful world. I have a very varied background. So I'm a graduate of the University of Vermont. I double majored in anthropology and sociology. So I see the world in a really big picture way. I have also a background in medicine. Initially, I was going down the route to somehow end up as some type of medical doctor. I worked in pharmacy for a while. I also, you can see I joined the military. I had an F-16 with my name on it. So the path is not linear necessarily. And I'm a perfect example of all of the experiences that you can grab. Life is kind of like a carnival ride. You need to grab all the tickets out there so that you can ride each ride when it's appropriate to ride those rides. So that's my background. It's varied. You'll also see that middle picture right there is a beautiful view. I was able to go live in Europe for a couple of years based on my experiences. So that's a little bit about my background. And Alex, if you hit me to the next slide, my current role right now, again, drawing from all of my life experiences, has put me in a really interesting position now. I serve as a recruiting and retention officer for the North Atlantic States Carpenters Training Fund. So I am deeply involved with the trades. Had I known about the trades when I was younger, I probably would have gotten into them. My father was a carpenter by trade. Ironically, he pushed me down certain paths, which I don't regret. Of course, they are all very valuable life experiences, but I'm a commercial diver and pile driver by trade now. And of course, I'm really interested in providing information to you, the audience, about one opportunity out there, but certainly college. I'm trying to change that narrative. College isn't for everybody, to the trade isn't for everybody. But my point is, whatever you want to do, be true to yourself and set a goal and rely on your resources to attain that goal, and you will find nothing but success out there. Keep a positive attitude.
Thank you so much. I think that's going to be such an important array of background knowledge that you could share, because you're right, the transition after high school is not linear. So I think that's going to be a great perspective that is important. So thank you for being here. We have next up is Sarah. So Sarah, if you want to share.
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Sarah. I work for a nonprofit in New York City called Global Kids. I also have a mental health background, so I'm a licensed clinical social worker. And through both of these experiences, I also found a way to integrate my deep passion for climate activism. So if you want to go to the next slide. When I was in my NYU grad program for mental health, I had the opportunity to spend 4 months in Argentina, where I worked at an orphanage and worked really closely one-on-one with young people. And as I was there, I was seeing the beauty of Argentina. So here's a picture of some glaciers in El Calafate. And I got to understand just how important healing from a one-on-one lens is, but also from a macro lens. You want to go to the next slide? So then I found Global Kids in 2017. It was right after I graduated with my master's at NYU for social work. And Global Kids, as I mentioned before, is a nonprofit that works in schools throughout New York City and Washington, DC. And we provide after-school programs that try to fill in a lot of the spaces that the education system has. We focus a lot on human rights. And for example, I began a group at the school I work at currently called Queer Alliance. So we are a support group within the school, and it's a really awesome opportunity to just give students a space to have kind of inclusive and reflective conversation. If you want to go to the next one, we also get to protest. This is a photo pre-COVID of us protesting the Williams Pipeline on Brooklyn Bridge. And this just also shows how passionate the students are. So I also was able to travel through Peace Boat, which is a partner of Global Kids. And this provided me an opportunity to see just how many ways you can grow with experience and find your career. There's no traditional track. And so Peace Boat is an international vessel where you get to talk about peace. And I can show you a couple of photos from that experience. So this is the boat. It's large. It's about 1,000 passengers, and it can go around the world in 3 months. I was there for one leg of that journey, and we got to talk on board to international folks about how they feel about human rights. So we started in Ushuaia in Argentina. That's known as El Fin del Mundo, the end of the world, because it's at the tip of Argentina. And then we sailed to Chile. If you want to go to the next slide. This was my group that was able to go on board with me, and we were promoting the Sustainable Development Goals, which are all about how to heal the world with different kind of focuses. So if you see here, there's life on water, there's climate action, there's life on land, etc. You want to go to the next one? And these are just some photos of some stuff we did on board. We got to sign a petition to try to help preserve some areas of Patagonia. You want to go to the next one. We got to work with another organization called Leader of Light and put lights in a community in Chile that didn't have any like night lamps. So it hopefully made their community safer. And then when I got home, I still was able to find climate activism by joining online panels and talking about why it's so important to come together to talk about these issues. And here's a photo from World Oceans Day. So you can really do whatever you want. I never could have even written that out if I was in college trying to imagine what I'd want to do with my life. But it was an incredible experience. And so, yeah, I hope you enjoyed.
Thank you, Sarah. I think that is such a great example of how we use both our education and our passion to change the world. So thank you for everything that you're doing. And our final panelist is Sarita.
Hello, my name is Sarita. It is an honor to be here today. So I wanted to start with a little bit of what I do. So I work with Health Advocate X that helps with really realizing the importance of advocating for health. I work as a founder for JADE, which stands for Justice, Advocacy, and Disability Education. I'm a co-founder and CEO of Disabled in Higher Ed, as well as Communication Student Co-Chair and Incoming Policy Student Co-Chair for APHA, which stands for our American Public Health Association Disability Section. So why do I do all this? It's who I am that informs what I do. So next slide, please. So I am a proud disabled Black, bisexual, Indigenous woman. Every intersection that I live at, I live proudly, but also it does infer a lot of burdens to live at an intersection. And if you can go to the next portion, one click ahead, there's this myth of being a Black woman that holds that we should be uniquely strong and able to endure all this pain and that we're so resilient, but that also ends up disallowing us disability. I never knew that I was disabled, even though I had mental health conditions when I was in high school like you, but I never had IEPs, 504, any support. It wasn't until very recently that I really came into this awareness of who I am as a disabled woman. And what that leads to is, next slide, please, is this need for resilience that becomes its own type of burden where it's not even a compliment anymore to be called resilient. And if we can go one click ahead, please. We look at resilience as something of who we are as a person. Maybe in disability, we look at it as a family we have around us. But this also becomes a case of if we're called resilient, nothing changes. The challenge, the societal barriers, the attitudes, the ableist attitudes, the barriers live, and we just get to face adversity after adversity and getting back up. And it's okay if you need to take time to take your journey at whatever speed you need to, because at this point in my career, I'm just working on finishing my thesis at University of California, San Diego, and it's taken me 19 years to get this close to my bachelor's. And it's been a lot of trauma along the way. Next slide, please. But what's really fostered importance to me is being a disability advocate. All the resilience, everything that I had to do, disability advocacy felt like something I had to do to combat the forces of ableism that drive higher education in big institutions like the University of California, San Diego. And ableism is a form of discrimination that we don't speak as much as racism. This, as my image says, is a false idea that disabled people are by default inferior, when in truth, disability is just another way for a mind or body to be. And that's why I am proud of my disability identity. Disability inclusion is something that I call forward in every event that I'm a part of, because it's not just being aware disabled people exist, but including them in spaces. And as much as we respect all of our gender pronouns, mine are she, her, hers, just disability pronouns deserve just as much respect. I identify as a disabled woman, invisibly disabled and neurodivergent. And that is my disability identity. Disability is diversity, because we are a community and you can be proud of who you are. And being able to take that pride into whatever your next step is absolutely critical, because a lot of spaces will try to tear down the pride you may have in disability, in who you are, because autism, ADHD, so many of these conditions do become a part of how we exist and move through the world. That's why it's really important to take the time you have after graduating high school to really think about how you're going to balance your health with your education, whatever it looks like. Because your parents may have supported you a lot in your health prior to high school and before, but when you go to college, you have some support for accommodations. They don't support you in coordinating your care, your doctor's appointments, and finding that balance for yourself. So that's why I really wanted to be a part of Health Advocate X, to help make that transition a little smoother, in thinking mindfully of how you take reins of your own health as a disabled person moving ahead in your life. So thank you so much for allowing me time to introduce myself, and thank you for being here. It's quite an honor.
Thank you, Sarita. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. It's pretty remarkable. So that's your panel of experts. So what I'd love for you all to do is start thinking about questions that you want to ask, or generating them. I will compile them. And in the meantime, I wanted to provide a little bit of a framework or an overview of how we're going to frame out kind of what this journey to college is. Again, my name is Alex. I'm the Dean of Admissions, Transition Programs, and Strategic Outreach at Beacon College. I've exclusively worked within the special education realm for about 15 years, always on this idea of what happens after high school. I worked with students with excellent test scores and who can get into any college in the United States, but struggled once they entered. So my mission is to figure out what's really going on in high school, what's really going in college, and how do we have some honest conversations about other options, alternative paths, and how to partner to kind of change the game of life after high school. And that's why I love Beacon College. Beacon College is the first four-year accredited college exclusively for students who learn differently. I like to say that we are just like every other college, same diploma, but how we teach is different. Smaller class sizes, automatic accommodations, removing barriers that a lot of higher ed have put into place that limits people with disabilities to get access to rightful and legal services. Over the past 7 years, Beacon has been in such a period of growth, which I think just shows the need for more institutions like this. We have gone really, really small, from 185 to really small to 450. We're located right outside of Orlando, Florida. So if you're not looking for a college and you're looking for fun, we have Disney right around the corner. Most of our students come here with a predominant diagnosis of ADHD, growing population of students with dyslexia, dysgraphia, dyscalculia, autism spectrum disorder, and a conglomerate of other learning differences that don't fit the mold, especially given COVID. COVID disruptions have really probably disrupted a lot of people's pathways, and I think that's part of why this conversation is so important. There is no longer a very traditional path forward in high school, so it's more important to have these conversations now. I've come to Beacon and I've developed the transition arm of our college. We are really focused in on reducing unnecessary attrition in college for students who learn differently. And that might be, as Zibin was saying, that college might not be the option, and we need to be providing that alternative and realistic evaluation of what our students' needs are, what is realistic given what the environment is, and how do we develop skills for the student and the parent, real family-centered transition programming, in order to provide you support as you navigate this journey, because not everybody has the resources. And I think you're going to hear from this panel a little bit later about what do you do when you have the resources, and what do you do if you don't have that support team behind you. We offer programming as young as 10th grade with our summer college immersion program through Navigator Prep, which is the country's first and only virtual transition to college program for students and parents in 11th and 12th grade. We have an online semester program, live learning, where students can get general education requirements taken care of. And we've been working now almost, I think this year we'll hit 1,000 students, which to me, coming from a small private school in Connecticut, to be able to touch that many students' lives has been probably the most rewarding piece of my career. So part of why I really feel like I'm here is to kind of provide a perspective of what I've learned from the 1,000 students in our programs. What is going on around the country? What's going on with students, schools, and families, so that we can reshape the dialogue as it relates to the post-secondary transition. I think first and foremost, it's important to recognize that so often students are forced to make a decision, or schools are forced to make a decision around students' post-secondary placement as young as age 16. I go back to 16. If somebody told me I'd be sitting here then, I would think they're crazy. And most times at 16, you're not even at the level of maturation yet where you can really dive into what your life is going to look like. 2 years of high school, especially for students who learn differently, that do not have a traditional learning curve, could look like thousands of different roads. So I want us to be cognizant that limiting options to one track at age 16 sometimes is a really dangerous way to go. I read IEPs on a daily basis. Every single student that comes through Beacon College, I read their IEPs or their psychoeds or their neuropsychs. And when I see somebody pigeonholed at age 16 without consideration of developmental stages, family circumstances, this pandemic, I feel like we're kind of limiting what skills we could work on and what our options are as that student matures. And what we're not showing is flexibility in programming. We are not predicting maturation. We're not thinking about skill mastery. And a lot of times for students in special education, they're also limited to how much they're going to be pushed outside of their comfort zone. And I think making sure that we're providing authentic learning experiences, both academically, vocationally, socially, and emotionally, from age 16 throughout graduation, could be really pivotal as you start to rethink your post-secondary placement. I also like to inform families you're not bound by your IEP goal. So just because it might say that you should be going to college or career doesn't mean that that's your only option. You have autonomy in your decision. This is just one recommendation based on a set of data. So really create your team. And I think with that is, now more than ever, you're hearing right now, there is not a traditional entry. The college journey, the college transition isn't a one-stop shop after high school. You are not supposed to always get into that college of your choice. You're not always supposed to land your dream job at 18. The transition is a journey. And over the past 10 years, what we've seen in the world of education is that it's no longer career, community college, four-year college. There has been a flurry of transition programs, gap year programs, programs that are really rooted in therapeutic advancements, family-based programs. There are so many opportunities out there that most people are just not informed of because they're not the norm. Most college counselors are not going to be informed of these non-traditional placements. They're going to rely, a lot of people like to rely on what's comfortable and what's known. When I was working in education, I oversaw our transition programs at a private school. We called it the classic 4 colleges that we would send all students to. That doesn't work anymore because now people are seeing there needs to be a change. So I want you to think about that You do not have to fit a box after high school. There's something out there for everyone, no matter what your goals are. And I think what we have to think about is, what are the skills that the student needs to work on, and what is the best program that's going to meet this student's skill ability? We need to think about more the family. Families are often, my favorite thing for some reason is to correct this. We are often telling parents that you have to both take a backseat in college, but be in charge in high school. And that equation is silly. It doesn't work. You can't be in charge and then all of a sudden go away. It's mean, it's not real, and it doesn't actually happen. So we have to make sure that everything moving forward focuses on the family. Everyone needs to be on the same page, because if we could focus on the skill, if we could focus on the passion, like Zivin was saying, if we could focus on the reality that you're not having to fit one mold. Sarah brought it up beautifully. You can have a passion and an education. It's all great. Sarita talked about her journey. Angelique talked about everybody's experience is different. So don't settle for the box. But what we have to recognize is that, unfortunately, the transition is tough no matter where you're going. So I am going to be a little bit of the bearer of bad news to talk about the realities of what I want us to correct today. First, most people are determining their path in isolation. Either they're relying on this IEP, which is sometimes, depending on the district and algorithm, you have this cognitive score, you have this ability, therefore you have this outcome, or you have somebody told you that you're not college or career bound, and that's the decision that was made at a very young age. I once did a brief study with my students, and I asked, when did you hear about college for the first time? This was a group of students with NLD and Asperger's, and they said, when we got to sophomore year of high school. I learned about college when I was 9 years old. There is a reason why that is happening, and a large part of that is that a lot of the pathway towards the future is done in isolation and is done reactively. As Sarita was talking about, this is not part of inclusion in the space. It is a different pathway and a different dialogue that is not appropriate. We know that students need more time to prepare for the unknown, so we need to give it to them. The best way to do that is not in isolation. We have to recognize that no matter where you're going, there's a shift in environmental expectations. There's a shift in the role of the family because of the legalities around IDEA to ADA, FERPA, HIPAA, social norms, unspoken rules of the workforce, unspoken rules of college. I've worked with families that parents have tried to talk to bosses on behalf of their child, and that's no longer appropriate. Not just because of privacy law and confidentiality, because it could be socially isolating for the student. We have to be more cognizant of the spoken and unspoken shift in expectations, no matter where you're going, because that dictates how well you adjust. We have to stop thinking that everything is generalized, and we have to focus on the skills, not broadly. It's not just executive functioning, but how do you plan? How do you prioritize? Are you able to manage your time without reliance on somebody? You might have really high social motivation, but you struggle with boundaries. What are the skills that you need to work on? Not what is the knowledge you need to learn? What are the skills you need to develop? And what really needs to then happen is you need to create a team of professionals that know the student both at a micro and macro kind of level. Who knows the student both in their immediate environment and outside of their environment? Who knows the student and can predict how that student will respond, how the family will respond? To ensure the best post-secondary transition, you have to look beyond the rigid environment where you're going and create your next environment. College is not a catch-all for all issues. Neither is a career. So you got to make sure that you have both a holistic transition plan, academically, vocationally, and Sarita said, in terms of health, mental health, physical health. And what I would like to talk about is that we often look at the path to college and the path to career as almost different roads, when in reality, they're pretty much the same pathway, different outcomes. What everybody needs to be doing is identifying the student skill, whether that's academic, cognitive skills, academic readiness, holistic. When I say holistic, I mean more social emotional. What are their social integration skills, emotional regulation skills? Are they aware? And we're going to talk about that in a second. I always like to then ask, what is the frequency and intensity of support? How often and how intense does the student require parent, teacher, counselor support to perform a task? A lot of students come in with out of school support as well to master a lot of these skills. In Navigator Prep, we see that most students have 4 additional resources on top of their school that work on anything from executive functioning, social skills, and mental health. You have to take that into consideration, because once that structure is gone, you got to replace it. It can't just be an all or nothing kind of situation. That's where you typically see the biggest traps around sustainment and environments. So then you have to ask the question, based on what they have now, will they require the same support no matter where they're going? And is that next environment suitable given the need of support of my child? Or for yourself, you as well. It's key that we ask these pivotal questions, and then you ask the questions of these resources, not just around academic skills, because you're right, that might just be college. However, you have to be able to read at a certain level to handle a job. You have to be able to write at a certain level to handle a job. So often we forget that those academic skills don't go away just because you're not going to college. So you have to look at that plus the universal skills: executive functioning, emotional regulation, social integration and awareness, conceptual thinking, can you think abstractly, and your independent living. So I want us to kind of, as we talk about this, we're going to go through finding your different path, but sometimes the path to discovering your path is often the same assessment, just assessing different for different outcomes. And that's how I developed this kind of idea around the launch to a healthy adjustment to your next environment. I've spent 15 years trying to figure out what makes a successful launch, and I have written papers and I presented nationally, and it's always very complicated. And then I started to just think about, very simplistically, what do I hear the most? The thing I hear the most is that a student is not going to be successful in their path, no matter where they go, unless they self-advocate. And I thought to myself, okay, everybody's saying advocacy. Well, that is a really freaking hard skill to master, and we don't give enough credit to what self-advocacy actually looks like. And to me, self-advocacy is a result of a lot of skills everyone should be learning in order to discover what their path is. In order to adjust to your next environment in a healthy way, meaning there's going to be problems, but they're not going to lead to significant setbacks that prevent you from achieving your life goals. So in order to do that, first and foremost, you need real, authentic awareness. You need to understand your strengths and weaknesses. Parents, you need to understand realistically your child's strengths and weaknesses. You need to be able to understand your educational programming. What are your accommodations? What are your modifications? What are the spoken and unspoken support systems that you're receiving? Last year, we did a project with our students in Navigator Prep, and we asked 50 students if they could independently identify their accommodations. 3 were able to do that. It is next to impossible to get access to accommodations in college if you don't know your accommodations. It is impossible to get access to accommodations in the workforce if you don't know your accommodations prior. It is up to you. In order to self-advocate, you have to know yourself. You have to be able to understand what you've received and what you're getting. From there, once you know yourself, you're able then to explore, what are the systems that I have in place that are based on me, and what are the systems that I have placed that are on others. I come from the day of planners. I don't know if any other panelists is on me with that. We didn't have technology to track a lot of this stuff in college. We did advising and paper forms, and we had to remember deadlines the annoying way. Technology is now both a tool and a toy. And what's so difficult about this generation, no matter who you are, is that most schools have removed the need to develop your own executive functioning systems because of things like Google Classroom, Blackboard, Canvas. And what ends up happening is that students don't have a framework of knowing what systems do I need on my own versus what somebody is going to provide me. No matter where you go, you need your own executive functioning system. I manage a staff. I don't remind my staff of when deadlines are coming. I expect you to have a system. We don't have an internal system in my office to remind people of deadlines. And in college, what is such a misunderstanding is that professors often don't have to do that consistently. So if you do not have your system, you go to college, you're not going to be able to manage your academics. If you go to the workforce, you might miss deadlines, you might miss meetings, you might not remember what is required of you. So to have those executive functioning support systems, to have those compensatory strategies are key no matter where you go. Once you're able to develop those skills, you can then move on to more of what I call the process or cognitive oriented executive functioning skills. Fancy term of just saying, can you handle a setback and can you manage your emotions? Are you able to problem solve? Can you see two solutions to one situation? Or is there only one way to cross the street? Are you able to regulate your emotions? Not just cope, but express yourself appropriately. Recognize when that environment is going to be stressful. Utilize those tools during and reflect after. Once you're able to do those three things, you're then finally able to self-advocate. You've then learned about yourself. You've then recognized your holes and your needs. You can self-monitor. You've recognized that there's a problem that you need to solve, and you realize you can self-advocate for it. That leads you to adjust, no matter where you're going. And once I had that framework, a lot of things became very clear about how you design your path and how you get ready for that path. And that's why I'm here to talk about how do you formulate a transition team and a transition plan based on where you are right now. So what I would encourage you to do is identify your team now. Who knows you best? Whose student is your go-to person? Parents, who are your go-to people? Think beyond that group of professionals around the IEP table and think really holistically. Who has observed that student across multiple environments, in the classroom, out of the classroom, in structured programming where rules exist, and unstructured program where there are no rules and the rules are unspoken. You then need to create realistic benchmarks about what's next. And then over time, you have to taper away supports. You have to figure out how can you self-advocate for accommodations, because so often in high school, they're given to you. You have to be able to label when a student is not meeting benchmarks, because at some point, they're not going to get that feedback. They're either meeting the expectation or they're not. And in high school and a career, modifications don't really exist. You either meet the demand or you don't. We can help accommodate you to that journey, but we're not going to remove those expectations. And then please get creative. Do not think in isolation. Think about next year. Think about 3 years from now. Think about 10 years from now. And you want to think in terms of skill development. What are the skills you need to work on first? What comes next? What comes after? Because we're humans. We cannot work on everything to forge a path towards success. Sometimes we can only focus on one area at a time. Maybe that's academic, so we just take some courses. We don't live on campus simultaneously. Maybe it's just vocational and we're in a vocational transition program. Maybe it's social, so we're doing a travel program. Maybe it's emotional. There's great flurry of therapeutic programs out there now for 18+ students that are not talked about as much, but you have to create your unique outcome, because as you're about to hear from everyone, the path towards success is not linear and it's no longer traditional. So before, this is my cue for everybody, get ready with some questions, please. Before we go there, there's great ways to stay connected with us. Again, my goal is to continue outreach so that you're well informed about your journey. We have great information sessions about all of those programs. We also do free informational webinars around things like the difference between IDEA and ADA in a concrete way, because it's confusing. We do some great work around financial aid and figuring out the cost of college. So get connected with us, schedule a meeting with me directly. My contact will be at the end as well. And here we go. So let's go with some panel questions. I'm going to start with Sarah. What do you wish you knew in high school as you prepare to graduate? Good segue from what I just talked about.
Yeah, definitely. What I wish I knew was that I could rely more on the adults around me that I felt comfortable with. I actually got less guidance from my guidance counselor and more guidance from the people in my life that were maybe the director of the theater company that I was part of, or even like my singing teacher or my dad. And I relied on those resources a little bit, but I wish I knew then that there is no such thing as a stupid question. And there's always support around you to make it feel less daunting. You know, for me, the idea of any future goal was so overwhelming, but it's easy to break down into little steps. And those little steps make it feel like it's actually doable. So I think that, yeah, I wish I calmed down a little, but also knew that I could rely on people around me.
So I heard three things. I think one, chunking the transition. Great skill, great strategy. We use that in education. We can use that in planning. Two, use the team. The best person that might know you might not be your guidance counselor, right? And three, don't listen. I mean, we're gonna all listen to outside perspectives, right? Society tells us there's one track for most people, but that pressure could be so daunting. And when you are so burdened with pressure, it impacts kind of your decision-making. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for sharing, Sarah. I think that kind of goes into the next question for Angelique. Yeah, they're perfect. Sorry, I couldn't see everybody on my panel. You're working with students in that transition. How do you think from the ground up, based on everything you're seeing, what can students do now to really get prepared for college?
Yeah, so the big thing that I've heard a lot, especially when Alex was sharing, is this word advocacy, right? Self-advocacy. That's something that I do push on to a lot of my students, especially I've been in previous IEP meetings that I haven't led before. And to be honest, they have been a bit daunting and a bit draining, where they don't come off as student-centered. I don't hear much of the student speaking, and I think it's because you know, they are a minor, and it's just mainly their parents talking to the teacher, or the parent, or you know, the teacher, the admin, the counselor talking, and so the child is just sitting there and they're just listening and taking in all this information. And so one thing that I do for a lot of my meetings too, is I do make them student-centered, although they are a minor, or if they are an adult. I ask the questions to the student directly, and I make sure that, you know, the student feels comfortable enough in that meeting, because it is about them at the end of the day. And I always tell them this too, like, we're all here because of you. Right? We're not here because of your mom, or, you know, your mom may have concerns and things like that. But essentially the whole idea and this whole IEP meeting is to help you be successful. So I know it is intimidating to speak up at meetings, and you know, you hear all these people using all these big words and things like that, and you don't know what terminology they're using and things like that. And a lot of the times I just tell my student, well, first and foremost, I break down a lot of the terminology that is used in the IEP meetings. But for any other students that are out there that do feel overwhelmed at the meetings and don't understand or know what terminology or what is going on, I would, you know, just raise my hand and say, hey, what does that word mean? Like, or what is a triennial? What is an annual meeting? What does that mean? You know, and just asking about those key terms, that definitely can help with, you know, of course, you understanding. Another big thing too about advocating is understanding the situation in order to speak up and advocating for yourself, right? So you want to be able to understand the terminology and things like that, to be able to speak up and say something. So that's a really good practice skill that I do for a lot of my students in the IEP meetings, and that I would highly recommend for your child or any adult students or any students that are maybe in this workshop. I would strongly suggest you just doing that, just asking simple questions during the meeting. And again, no question is a stupid question. It does not exist at all. Especially when it's in a meeting about you, right? So That's my biggest thing. The advocacy is like
Love that.
the biggest thing.
I think it's really important to reiterate, everyone, IEPs are confusing. They're not written for the student. It is I remember sitting in an IEP meeting as a professional and saying, can we just stop and use some normal language, please? It is fine. Everyone, so students, we do it. We ask the clarifying questions. I know it's scary, but it's important. I also think it's really important to reiterate, talk to the student. Most students are not participating in an IEP. I did a workshop on this, and Angelique, correct me if you think I'm wrong on this, but you don't have to be at the IEP the entire meeting. Try to go for 20 minutes. Start small and work your way through it as a transition. It doesn't have to be all or nothing. So you can come, hear a little bit, and maybe leave and grow into full participation.
Yeah, so the population I work with, they're majority of them are adults, so they do tend to stay during the entire meeting. But yeah, I definitely agree with Alex. If you feel like it is overwhelming, I would say, come in the beginning just so that you have an understanding of what's going on. And I probably wouldn't come in towards the end because you're probably like, oh my God, like what is all this information? Like what's happening? Like, so I would say if you want to do that strategy, come in the beginning so that you can introduce yourself and then hear about what's going on. And then you can, ask those little bitty questions and things like that. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much. I feel like we focus so much on college. And so Zivin, I would really love to hear from you now about kind of your own career path. And I think career is very different than college because, especially in today's climate, entry-level jobs are the way you get started. So based on your depth of experience, how did you gauge your readiness in terms of the next steps that you were taking along your path?
Certainly. So you're never going to be ready for anything. You'll be ready-ish, and everybody is different. So how did I know I was ready for anything? I'm inquisitive and curious by nature. So literally one day I was standing in a parking lot and I heard a jet fly overhead and I was like, cool, wonder what that jet's doing. I did a little research, went down the rabbit hole of the military, and lo and behold, 6 years later, yes, that was a path that I undertook. It was a calculated whim. I always do a ton of research from as many sources as I can gather and really set the expectation for me and myself only. Don't be worried about what the guy or girl next to you is doing. Focus on yourself. And that level of self-awareness, I think that Alex was talking about several slides ago, is really, really important. There are certain things that I know that I love to do, and there are certain things that I know that I absolutely do not want to do. Crossing those things off of your list is just as important as having an idea of what you may or may not want to do. And at some point, you're going to have to take a leap of faith, and you're going to have to get out of that comfort zone just a little bit. Again, hopefully you've done your research to set yourself up for success as best as you can. But knowing full well that it's a wild world out there and something could change at the drop of a hat. You could wake up tomorrow and there could be a pandemic rolling into town, and here you are 18 months later and you're still up against the same challenges. So educate yourself as to what you're getting into. Rely on as many resources as you can. Don't be afraid to admit that you are never going to be ready. I don't know what my next step is in my career, but again, I'm grabbing all these tickets in life, and when that carnival ride opens up for me, I'm going to jump on it. You can change your mind too. I knew that when I was enlisting in the military, I didn't have a ton going on at the moment. And I knew that in the next 6 years, I wasn't planning on having a family or having kids or anything like that. So it was really kind of just, like I said, a calculated whim, no time like the present. And ultimately, I knew that enlistment would end at some point, and I would gain something from it. And having a positive outlook and looking for the positive in everything will make any untenable situation certainly much more palatable. So you're never going to be ready fully. Take a leap of faith, trust yourself, trust the resources and the support systems that you have. Get out of that comfort zone. And when you go to bed at night, remember that tomorrow you're going to wake up and it's a new day, every day.
I love that. I love ready-ish. I think that is such an important concept, because I think as humans, and especially younger adolescents, you're looking for security that might not really exist yet. So being comfortable with being uncomfortable, taking that risk, and recognizing the idea of ready-ish could be really cool, because you never know. I think if we all looked at our own paths, I know I got into special education by happenstance. It was never a plan.
Exactly.
And I fell in love. And sometimes that's all it takes, that risk.
Sarah said something really important too that I wanted to mention. Don't be so hard on yourself. You know, like some things are going to fall apart. My original goal was to go to medical school, and I did all my pre-med stuff after I graduated college, and I really didn't like it. And I knew that if I was going to spend 10, 12 years trying to become a doctor, I was going to be miserable. So I cut the cord sooner rather than later. And I said, well, you know what? I tried, didn't work out, and that's okay. There is so much opportunity out there. Don't be so hard on yourself.
And families will be supportive. I had the same experience. I was supposed to go to law school. I hated my internship, and I sat down and had a conversation. You'd be surprised, students that are listening, your parents do want to hear from you about your interests. So Zivin, thank you so much for that. And I think creating our own journey and making our stamp in society is really what we're talking about here. That's part of your path. So Sarita, I think you could speak to this better than anybody. Why did you become a disability advocate? What drove you to that?
So becoming a disability advocate, I saw so much of the disparities in how disabled people are seen in higher education. I think I asked you to include a next slide on this for me. So in this image, this is a disability inclusion graphic that just came out from Johns Hopkins Disability Health Research Center. You see that little box in red on there? That's my university, UC San Diego, an F in disability inclusion. As you can imagine, being at a school rated so low, there were a lot of problems everywhere. There were like, this problem spawned a problem that spawned another problem, like from the classroom to events. Because when we go to college, accommodations, which is its own separate category here, you see how it has like a big healthy blue section. Like that's what you get when you go to the office. Like most colleges, when you go their little like things will be like, oh, we have this office of students with disabilities, you apply for it this way. And that's the end of what they'll tell you. But they won't tell you that that's only the beginning of the struggles you'll experience in just trying to use those accommodations. I had a point when I was just afraid to talk to a teacher because of how they spoke to me, how they made it feel like I was getting a special privilege to have the extra time I had, how they tore me down when I tried to ask for that rescheduled exam for when my fibromyalgia wouldn't let me wake up in the morning. It was looking at choices when I first got into UCSD, being on the first floor or taking advantage of a living and learning community for bioscience living and learning community, because I wanted to be a doctor at 1.2 or a neuroscientist. Probably not going to do either of those, but I chose the living and learning community. Who knew I was choosing the 11th floor? It wasn't until I realized that there was a fire drill and they had no plan for disabled people except for, oh, you don't have to participate. You could just go home or something like that with a friend. You could leave early. You don't have to participate. It's like, so is God or Mother Nature going to call me in case of an emergency? It becomes like this need to be a disability advocate to ensure that we're included in higher education. This lists the top 25 universities compared by the amount of funding they receive from the NIH. If this is the top 25 universities, think about the rest. You don't have to go to these really big colleges right out of the gate. Like if I knew what I knew now, I probably would have taken my journey a little bit slower and not gone into college the first minute I got out of high school, and just taken time to understand my own health, starting a mental health journey. Like being a disability advocate is something that I do see the difference I've left, but it also cost me a lot in my mental and physical health. But I also gained a lot of meaningful connections in a disability community that means the world to me on disability Twitter. And Disabled in Higher Ed is hosting its full month of disabled empowerment in higher education month, because our institutions don't support us. So we have to support each other. So that's something that disability inclusion really means to me is how we come together when everything pulls us apart.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I mean, one, for your just disclosure, and two, for your honesty around your journey. I think it's really important. We have a question that I think I would like to open up to anybody. You know, as parents, how do we help our students see the options that we're talking about that are non-traditional? How do you actually go about doing that? And then if we don't have the skill set ourselves, how do we help students master those skills? Technology, stress management, executive functioning. So kind of two-pronged. How can we point people to the direction of nonlinear placements? How do they see it? And then how do we teach those skills if we can't, in isolation, do it at home? I don't know if anybody wants to jump in around that.
So I'll take how do we as parents help our students? Oh, I lost the question. I'm here to tell you, if you are interested in careers in the trades, do a Google search, check it out, honestly. And I hate to say, it feels like a cop-out saying that, but the internet is full of information. I really recommend that if you are interested in the trades, unionized tradesmen, men and women across the board. So not just carpentry. I work specifically in the carpentry umbrella, but you have plumbers, pipe fitters, electricians, you name it. Most unionized trades will have an apprenticeship program, a registered apprenticeship program. And while my program specifically, we don't cater necessarily towards IEPs, we have all sorts of students in our classrooms. Our classrooms are small. It's pretty close to one-on-one instruction, 10 people in the class maximum, working with our hands. We understand that people who are coming to an apprenticeship or working in the trades period typically don't want to be behind a computer screen or don't want to be sitting at a desk and using those type of skills. So we're hands-on, visual learners, auditory learners, tactile learners, and our small class sizes will really help to address as best as we can some of those maybe social emotional needs. I personally have struggled with anxiety my entire life, anxiety and depression, and it's really about fostering the next generation of young tradesmen and women in a way that suits everybody's needs individually. It's not, one size is not going to fit all out here, and the time is now to address all of these needs on a personal level. So go online if you want to be in the trades, check them out. Google apprenticeship programs in the trades. Military, having that experience, obviously you're going to need to have some discipline and be able to follow very strict rules. But I found that for me personally, that really honed my ability, and coming out of the military, what I do now, it really allowed me to sort what I need to do to keep my anxiety manageable and face the day, every day, full of excitement and ready to just grab it.
Thank you so much. I think some other options too is be honest in your IEP. If you feel like there's an area that you would like to focus more on, say it. Use your power as a parent to inform and intervention plans about skill development. You all have transitional goals, make that part of it. Vocational rehabilitation does career exploration and career shadowing. And there's educational consultants that you could utilize for some of these non-traditional placements. If you look up IECA, that's a great national organization of educational consultants that could help you with some of those non-traditional placements. And if you find one, ask who the competitors are. There's no harm in saying, I'm here visiting. Who do you typically kind of cross with? What are the other programs that your students typically look at before you go? A great person in the field will be very comfortable talking about that. More questions are coming in, so I want to keep going with questions if that's okay. How do we open up to our parents that we would want to do a trade or vocational school? My parents are firm believers just to go to college. Sarita, go ahead. I could see the excitement. Go.
Yes, definitely. And thank you so much for sharing this question, because in the end, I think the most important thing to communicate to our parents is they're not the ones who would be going to college. It would be you. If you don't want to be there, they're decreasing the quality of your life to force you to fit into their box. They can't live their dreams through you. All they can do is hope that you live the best life that you want for yourself. and just to share why you feel passionate about trade and vocational schools and ask them to listen. If it's a conversation you don't feel comfortable having with your parent by yourself, like ask them to come to a therapy appointment if you have a therapist already, and have that little buffer human. If there's a close friend you have in your family that you feel could also be a good buffer human that understands your passions, have them there for that conversation. But it's really important to make sure that parents understand that they need to let you live your life. Like all the hands-on of K through 12 has to end at some point, because this isn't going to continue to be a family system moving through like higher education and your career. You'll be an independent adult making your choice, and you deserve to be happy and to have the career that you dream of. And that can be in the trades vocational school. And Zevin, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
No, thank you so much. Your parents cannot live vicariously through you, or if they are, they're doing you a serious disservice. Two things real quick about the quality of life in trades and vocation. I am able to own my own home because of my position in the trades. The trades are truly one of the last gateways into the middle class. I'll work for 30 years and I will have probably $1 million in my annuity account and a full pension to draw on. It's a tough way to make a living sometimes, certainly, but the quality of life really is second to none, and something that you won't find really in many other sectors of the American society right now, and that's just a fact. Second that I want to point out is a lot of trades programs, mine included, we have articulation agreements with 3 colleges. So just because you don't want to go to college right now, or college isn't a great fit for you right now, if in the future that's something that you want to undertake, there's opportunity built into the trade and the vocational system, again, depending on where you end up. But it's not linear. Like we've always said since the beginning of this discussion, just because you want to work with your hands now doesn't mean that that's not going to open up other avenues and opportunities for you within the trade itself. So keep an open mind. Yes, this is your life, Sarita. Thank you for hammering that home. This is your life. It's what you're going to make out of it. And there's options out there. Quality of life in the trades. I cannot say it enough. I make more money now using my trade skills than I do arguably with my college degree. So take that for whatever it's worth.
And I just want to pop in for one quick moment while we still have the graphic on the screen. Like you see all 25 of these schools right here. Like I have friends who came into UCSD straight out of high school, went through all 4 years. They're graduating alongside of me now. And they're like, well, now what? if you go to college when you're not ready and it's not something you want to do you really want to spend 4 years of your life and then walk at graduation and be like, so what now? I don't want to do anything involved with my degree. You don't
with debt, probably.
Yes, lots of debt.
And I think
another
it's
fact
important that we recognize that generationally, times have changed. You know, what was the norm 20 years ago when we were growing up is not the norm now. So build your resources, students. Feel free to say, look, you don't understand where I'm coming from. Maybe I can bring in an expert. Maybe we could talk about it in my next IEP meeting. It doesn't have to be one conversation. There's a follow-up question that I think is really important that we cannot miss, which is, do we have advice for schools to increase kind of the work that they're doing in IEPs? I'm trying to say that as nicely as possible. What we're seeing is that sometimes a 5-minute video might be considered job exploration, but it's really not meeting the mark. So any suggestions about how do you have that conversation with a district if they're not meeting your requirements, or you feel like the student is not getting their needs met? Sarah, please.
Thank you so much, Teresa, for this question. I can explain a little bit about what I feel Global Kids does really well, and then try to see how we can give an example of how it can look in different ways. So Global Kids has a program after school. It's 1 day a week, and it's called College and Career Readiness, where we really focus on, yes, college if you're interested in college, but also career. So if you're interested in a trade school, we kind of make those step-by-step processes ready for the students who are like, what do I do? I'm graduating high school, I don't know. So it really does allow the student themselves to maybe for one workshop, for example, it's how to have a debate on pros and cons of college or not college, or college and a vocational school, and just kind of allowing the student themselves to take autonomy on figuring out what they want their near future to look like, or what qualities they want it to have. And so if something like an after-school program is not possible, then maybe something like a one-off event during college application week, or during some kind of whatever month is easiest for you, honestly, to have just anything where you can get a group of students together and have a workshop. Even an hour and a half where you're discussing things that we talked about on this panel can be really life-changing for a student. You can give them incentives, maybe an extra credit or something to get them in the room, but really just kind of allowing that space for conversation.
I also think it's important just to be honest. I don't know, Angelique, if you have anything that you want to add, because you work a lot with IEPs probably, but for some families, don't feel like you have to skirt around your concern and just say, I don't know if this is really meeting my students' needs, or can you walk me through how you see this one program is helping them with career exploration? What is the data? What's the assessment that you're using? It's okay to ask questions. I think so often we think when parents ask questions, they're being confrontational or helicopter parents. It's your right as a parent to ask the question and to challenge the system. It does not mean that you're confrontational. It means you're actually collaborative. You're asking the questions. I don't know if anybody has anything to add on that. I'm gonna have to go to the very last slide, guys. They ask good questions, so I'm really sorry about that, but I want to make sure our contact information is up while there's more questions being asked. What do you guys think about the role of parents asking those questions? Do you feel like that is something that they should be doing, or do you feel like that is something that gets the bad rap for some reason?
In my experience, you're not going to have your parent with you on a job site, and I love getting all the information and using your resources to make the best decision for you. But I think, Alex, you really hit the hammer on the nail on the head, that at some point, once you know your limitations and what you're up against, you being an advocate for yourself is really, really crucially important, because yes, somebody is not going to always be there next to you. And if you can make those decisions on your behalf as best as you can, you're going to be in a much better position, certainly in the trades world.
Yeah, and maybe asking the student, right, to like, can you explain how this video is helping you, or what are you benefiting? Angelique, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries. No, one thing I was just going to add to that was, because I know, students are, some of them are younger when they're in their IEP meetings, and sometimes, they are afraid to speak up. They're at an age where they don't want to speak up, or they're afraid to speak up. So I genuinely feel like it's okay for parents to ask those questions. And then one thing that I would advise parents is, when you leave the meetings, behind closed doors, when you're with your child, ask them, is this what you like? Is this what you want to do? Because sometimes, I would say 8 times out of 10, the student doesn't want to speak up at the meeting. And so they feel much better or more comfortable with speaking with their parent at home. And then the parents can raise the questions in the meetings. So that's when I would say, yes, parents, go ahead, ask the questions, especially if your child, has those questions, or, is afraid to speak up during the meetings.
Sarita, go ahead. Yeah, final thought on that.
Yes, I was going to say that you could always do it with your students as well, and help them to get onto disability Twitter, as Disabled in Higher Ed has a lot of amazing people on there. And if you help them set up their account, they can tweet a question, mention us, mention me, I'll amplify it. And we can work together to help them find their own path, because it is really critical to really allow that path building to happen. And also, to go into the next question a little bit, also following at Actually Autistic and tweeting under it if your son connects with that community, and speaking with actually autistic adults like me, like we can share our experience in higher education, in trades, and how we took that next step, because it's being self-aware, but it's being self-accepting more, and being inclusive and accepting of your own disabilities as well. Because in a way, it is like one of those great things that we get to do as young adults, to learn who we are and to explore that. So as much as you can, let your son do it on his own and just show him the space and let him explore it.
I love, what a great conclusion. I think with that, our contact is here. Please reach out to us. We're all available for further questions. And really be part of our team. We're here to change the landscape, and we're just very grateful to be here tonight to talk to you. So Denise, I will turn it back over to you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for coming tonight. And thank you especially to Alex and the panelists. You really inspired us with your stories, your insights, and educated us so much. So thank you.